Offers end July 5th.
Dartmouth's home for sports. 94.5 FM, ESPN Radio.
Back here, Franklin and House, ESPN Radio for the Upper Valley, 94.5 FM, 1400 AM, Hanover, Lebanon, White River Junction, Thetford, Vermont. Just heard from Steve up there in Thetford. 12:30 AM in Claremont, online, 945ESPN.com. In case you haven't heard, Upper Valley Nighthawks rained out tonight. Some storms going to be making their way right around game time, so game postponed tonight in White River Junction. It'll be made up tomorrow in Mystic, Connecticut. They'll play a double-header, so they'll get the day off today. 2 in Mystic tomorrow for the Upper Valley Nighthawks. Brett Franklin alongside Matt Hausman in studio. So no Nighthawks tonight. Instant replay tonight, 6 to 7 o'clock on the radio and on TV. YCN TV Channel 20, HD 712. And then at 7:45, you have the College World Series House, Game 2 between Arizona and Coastal Carolina. Coastal Carolina trying to force a Game 3 tomorrow night. We'll have Game 2 tonight, 7:45, courtesy of Westwood One. So we mentioned before we took a break, legendary head coach, women's head coach, Pat Summitt from the University of Tennessee, passing away at the age of 64 this morning. And it's, again, you talk about pioneers in sports, Jackie Robinson for African Americans. You could easily say the same for Pat Summitt for women in women's basketball and what she brought to the sport. So this morning when I heard the news, I made a couple of phone calls and was very happy, even though on a somber occasion, to have on the line to put it in perspective for us here a little bit, House. The head coach of the Dartmouth women's basketball team, Belle Coquelin, is joining us. And, Coach, appreciate the time this afternoon.
Brett House, thank you so much for reaching out, on this this sad day for sport, really, not just women's basketball, but for sport. And like every sad day, we look for a way to celebrate it. So thank you for reaching out. Really appreciate it.
Coach, we were talking beforehand. You had an opportunity to meet Coach Summitt in your back in the day. And do you care to share that story with us?
Oh, absolutely. I have several stories to share. Definitely had a blessing to meet Coach Summitt and to coach against Pat when I was an assistant coach at Old Dominion. We would play Tennessee every single year, and that had a lot to do with Pat and Coach Wendy Larry's relationship. They just had the utmost respect for one another after competing against each other in the 1997 National Championship game. So really cool for two coaches, after battling it out in a National Championship game, and for Wendy losing to Pat to say, look, we respect each other and our programs enough to bring this environment and this competition to our fans, to women's basketball, to sport each and every year. So as an assistant, got to compete against Pat in Tennessee and at home, in Norfolk at Old Dominion, and those were always great games in front of 5,000 plus people, which is a great crowd for women's hoop. But my favorite story is the first time I ever met Pat, and this is great for Ivy League assistant coaches. I was an assistant coach. It was my first my first experience in coaching. I was at the University of Pennsylvania. I think it may have been my second year there. And in July, we're all out on the road recruiting, right? And that's part of our world as coaches. The month of July, you're packing your bags and you're out there and you're finding, you're doing laundry in the hotel rooms and you're out on the road the entire month, and you get to visit all of these, incredible places across the country. So for me, I was sent to what we call Monroe, Louisiana. House, you ever been there?
I can't say that I have.
Ever been to Monroe?
I haven't had the pleasure.
So, see, this is, if I can pitch to coaches, get into coaching. Get into coaching. You get to travel all over the place. So here I am, little, always little, right, 5 feet, but young assistant coach, Monroe, Louisiana, at the AAU Nationals, recruiting for Penn. And the day ended early. It was, I think we ended about 2 o'clock last game. It was a Sunday. I'll never forget it. And so there were a bunch of us assistant coaches. Actually, I think Courtney Bangart may have been with me. I'm going to have to reach out to her. I think she was definitely an assistant here at Dartmouth at the time. And Milena, who's now at Princeton, was at Yale. Kate Pay, who's now at Stanford, was with us as an assistant coach. So this is like my generation of coaches just getting started, right? So here we are. We finished the day, and we're like, hey, hey, let's all assistant coaches bond together. Why don't we go grab a drink or go grab something to eat? And in Monroe, Louisiana, on a Sunday, everything shuts down, particularly if you're looking for an adult beverage. So we're all driving around, and long story short, we find this one place that's open and is serving beer and wine. So we go in, there's a nice table outside, which we were grateful for because all the recruits and their families were inside feasting after their games. So we found a nice quiet table outside on the deck. And we're sitting there, there's like 7 of us, and we're about to order, and in walks Coach Pat Summitt with her crew, with her entourage. And Mickey DeMoss, another legendary coach who was Pat's assistant for so long and is still coaching. She was there with Pat, 4 or 5 people around Pat, and there's one other table on this deck, right? So now it's all these, young assistant coaches at one table and Pat and her crew at the other table, and we knew it wasn't going to take long before the tables combined and connected. And so there's music playing, we're chatting, and they're like, oh, a bunch of Ivy Leaguers, they're ripping on us. They're like, oh, we got the smart ones over here. All of the jokes that Ivy League hears nonstop, they were throwing at us. And, we reminded them that we didn't necessarily attend the Ivy League, that we were coaching in the Ivy League, kidding back and forth. And this is my favorite part of the story. After just being there for hours, connecting, chatting, Pat started buying us fried pickles. Mickey DeMoss, Monroe is apparently her hometown. She starts giving us all these stories about Louisiana. I learned more about Louisiana that day than ever before. But here's the point of the whole story is, everyone talks about Pat Summitt's stare. And if you have time, audience, click on all the links telling her story. Listen to her players. She has had such an impact on so many lives, and every one of her players will always mention the stare. Do you know what I'm talking about? If you've ever watched her coach,
oh yeah,
seen close-up, so it's the stare that we talk about. And so you think you have to be a player to feel it, but if you talk to officials, they'll tell you they've felt the stare. Opposing coaches have felt the stare. So there we were finishing up our meal, and we asked for our check. And our, waiter, waitress, can't remember, at the time said, oh, it's been taken care of. Your check has been, and we've been there for hours now, check has been taken care of. And all of us immediately stand up and look at Pat and say, we go into the coach, no, how could, please let us. And let me tell you, we got the stare. Oh, my gosh. And I felt it, and all of us, it was just complete silence. She looked at us, and she said, it's done. And that's it. That's all she had to say. We were like, okay, coach, thank you. We appreciate it.
That is.
So I can say that I've felt the stare, not in the ways her players have, I'm sure, but it's real. The stare is real.
But in a very good way down there in Monroe, as you put it. We are on the line with Dartmouth women's head basketball coach Belka Klonis, and talking about Pat Summitt, of course, passing away at the age of 64 on way too soon this morning. And Belle, you talked about coaching against her. I mean, you were fortunate enough to be, in a social setting with her and really get to know her off the court a little bit. But, as a young assistant like that, when you're in game, I know that you have a job and you're focused on your own team and what you need to be doing, but do you kind of glance over at the opposing bench? I mean, it's Pat Summitt over there. We're talking about over 1,000 wins and multiple national championships. Do you try and maybe see what she's doing and maybe incorporate that into some of your own coaching style? Does that happen in game?
It's tough. It's incredible to be in her presence is incredible. Was incredible. When you're in the game, you're in the game. There definitely were times, when we stand up and it's a timeout, and as an assistant coach, you still have to sit on the bench, right? I always say this is my favorite part about being a head coach. I get to stand up and walk around, finally, and I don't like to sit still. So as an assistant, I had to sit still, so I didn't get the best view of our opposing, bench. But I remember during timeouts, for sure, I was focused on the game plan and whatnot, but standing up. And the best part for me during those Tennessee games was just the environment. It was incredible. Like, when you're playing Tennessee, no matter where you are in the country, people come. People show up. They're there. It's amazing. And we, at Old Dominion, we had great crowds, nonstop. I mean, fantastic crowds for women's hoop at that time. But whenever Tennessee was in town, it was sold out. I mean, you couldn't find a seat. And I remember those moments and the energy in there and looking around, and it all has to do with this woman. And her coaching and what she's done for the sport. And then even more than that for us at Old Dominion was really her relationship with Wendy. She loved Wendy. They were such great friends, and they were both pioneers in their generation of women coaches for women's basketball. What they've done, what they did together, I think is so important to acknowledge. All her generation of coaches, her really leading the way for so many. So I remember those are kind of my memories in those moments, and seeing Wendy and her friendship was really cool for me being a young assistant. Hearing more about, I feel like I know Pat better because Pat and Wendy were so close, and Wendy would share so many stories about Pat. And then Wendy was impacted by Pat, just the way Wendy coached. Pat is known for her halftime speeches and her locker room inspiration, and that is clear. And I know there's a lot of video to show that. But even the moments that aren't captured on film, players will tell you that she really inspired in that locker room. And Wendy was the same way. She was the same way, and it always gave me chills. And I said, look, and now I want to be that way. And in our locker room, that's a really important place for us, and that's an important time for me as a head coach to inspire. That's from Pat. So it's incredible the impact she has had across generations, and whether you ever met her or you never met her, she's impacted your life. If you have anything to do with sport, if you have anything to do with women's basketball, she has impacted your life.
Belko Klonis, the head women's basketball coach at Dartmouth College, joining us here on Franklin and House. And one thing that I found amazing in just kind of looking at her biography and looking about her background, Belle, was she was hired at 22 to be the head coach at the University of Tennessee. Now, rewind, several years when you got hired in the Ivy League, you were one of the youngest head coaches, if not the youngest head coach at the time, but you weren't fresh out of college and getting a job. And, I just find that amazing, especially her rural roots where she didn't grow up with a lot of money, and and her father was a tough farmer, and it's really an interesting background. But I still can't believe she was 22 and took over that job. I mean that is pretty impressive.
I mean, looking back now, right? 22 and laying the foundation for women's athletics. When you think about it, I mean, she has inspired young girls, and she convinced. I know a lot of people are saying how she convinced generations of girls and women that there's a place for us in sport. She did that at 22, not even way before that as a player, but then as a coach at 22 with this vision. And I love to think about her stare, how what's really behind those eyes in that stare is this vision, for sport. And that's what that stare is, and that's why that stare is so intense, because as much as she was able to do in her lifetime, there's so much more to come that we're now responsible for. And that's what I think about when I think of her stare. But yeah, you're right, 22. Mama me, what were we doing at 22, right? Everyone could probably think about that.
Not something I could talk about on the air right now.
Yeah, you're going to make those decisions for young adults at 22? Seriously?
Belle, before we let you go, and I'm going to kind of put you on the spot here, and when you look at the Mount Rushmore of women's basketball, clearly Pat Summitt is on there, and you could even put her at the top as far as the standard of women's basketball. What other three coaches would you put on that list? I mean, obviously Wendy Larry I would imagine for you would be on there, and you could make that argument because she is one of the legendary women's basketball coaches in Division I. But if you had to put your Mount Rushmore with Pat Summitt on there, who would the other three coaches be? I know we're going to put you on the spot
total.
here.
Well, I'll give you three total,
okay.
And you named them. And, it is Wendy for me for so many personal reasons. But also when you look at, at the herstory, we like to say the her story of women's basketball, Wendy plays such a pivotal role in that. So if I may have, preferential, Wendy's on there. She's
yes.
on there. Pat's obviously on there, and so is Gino. You know, some people love him, some people have a tough time with him in the Upper Valley. You know, Connecticut's not that far away. I have the utmost respect for him. And, you know, there's a article this morning or interview this morning with him talking about for years, you know, just like I was saying how Wendy and Pat decided to play each other, right? These pioneer coaches moving the game forward. Yes, let's compete. Let's play each other every year. Well, Pat and Gino did that too. And people don't really look at how the two of them, even in throughout that competition, that competing, they were actually collaborating together for the sport, you know, for the big picture of it all. And so I would absolutely put Gino up there.
Now the tough one.
That's a tough one. You know, who would that fourth one be? There's so many, and do I have to choose?
Well, you know what?
On air.
We'll let you think on it. How about that? I'll let you off the hook. And of course, now that we are the flagship stations for basketball at Dartmouth, we will be talking to you much more frequently coming in the next few months.
We're very excited about that.
We are as well. So we'll let you off the hook for today, but eventually you'll have to come up with a fourth.
Coach, I tell you what, every coaches, they all have their impact. You know, so I can talk for you for hours about all the different coaches.
That's a very PC answer.
Amen.
Well done.
Coach Belko Klonis, we appreciate the time again. I know sad day in the women's basketball world, in sports world in general, but I think obviously with someone who has impacted as many lives as Pat Summitt has, you look on the good times and you look at what she has done for so many people. So we're very happy that you were able to take the time to talk to us today. And like House said, we'll be talking to you even more as we head down the stretch here in the summer and into the winter season.
Let's do it. We're here. We really appreciate the time. So
no problem. Thanks a lot, Belko Klonis, the head coach of Dartmouth women's basketball, joining us. And